Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. You know, back in the day it used to mean something. When you worked for a publication like the New York Post or the Washington Post, it used to carry weight. You know, even working at CNN to a certain extent gave you some sort of credibility or authority in the public eye. There used to be at least a little bit of trust in the mainstream media establishment. Of course, it was probably just as crooked and dirty as it is today, at least to a certain extent, but in terms of basic information and coverage, for the most part, there was a level of credibility. That credibility is gone. I mean, in the modern day, it has completely vanished. It doesn't exist anymore. And look, it really has nothing to do with us. It has all to do with them and their actions. Very often the media will claim that trust is down because people are just falling for the Trump fake news narrative. He's attacked the credibility of the press and it's his fault. No, it's not his fault. It's your fault. I'm looking at you, little Brian Stelter. Of course, I just had to mention our friend. But as we know, he isn't the only one. None of these characters are trustworthy anymore. They're so incredibly dishonest, and there's this really weird illusion that they try to cast to make it seem as if they're being fair when they're clearly being fundamentally unfair. I have the perfect example with a top Washington Post columnist by the name of Philip Bump, who walked off a podcast the other day because the questions being asked required him to be honest for a second, and that made him real uncomfortable. And so he decided the appropriate thing to do was to run away. Folks, this is the modern mainstream media. This is the Washington Post in the current day. Let me show you guys exactly what I mean by that. We got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. All right, friends, so here's the headline from the Gateway Pundit. Watch. Washington Post columnist walks off podcast after getting confronted with Joe Biden's business dealings with Hunter. One good way to tell the walls are closing in on the Biden crime family is by watching the reaction of legendary media journalists dedicated to running cover for the regime. A columnist from the Washington Post named Philip Bump best exhibited the media's panic with his behavior during a podcast and immediately afterward. As the New York Post's Miranda Devine reported, Bump spoke with Comedy Cellar owner Noam Dorman. On his podcast, he was grilled about Joe Biden's connections to his son Hunter's business dealings, particularly with the fact that the White House occupant was receiving millions in kickbacks. Throughout the interview, Bump angrily defends his, quote, reporting on the scandal, while Dorman presented facts that challenged the narrative Bump sells to the Washington Post readers. And towards the end, well, he pretty much called it quits and walked out of the interview. Let's play a clip with the podcast host, Noam, who introduced essentially what happened, and then a little snippet of the interaction.
There have been a number of investigations that have sort of dug into the business dealings of Hunter Biden and associated Biden family members, including Hunter's uncle, Joe's brother, James Biden, and some other people that are sort of in the Biden family who had received money. And it's not clear if the money was directly from business deals that Hunter Biden made. But in essence, the question is, and the idea that's being propagated by Republicans is that Joe Biden was involved in this to a significant extent and they believe benefited financially from these business relationships, although they have, as of yet, been unable to prove any such allegation.
Okay.
Is that fair?
Yeah, really fair. That was really articulate. That was great. Help me.
He's a professional.
He's the brightest guy in the country that disagrees with
There
you.
you go.
What do you take from the text message to his adult daughter, Hunter's text message, I have to give 50% of my income to Pop?
I have no idea what that means. I have no idea what that means.
Well,
I know it's circumstantial evidence, and you prefer that.
No,
to
what
direct evidence.
could it be?
I have no idea.
But
I don't know.
Well,
I appreciate your.
Has anybody asked her?
I don't know. I don't know.
Don't you think somebody should ask her?
Okay. I'm not. I just said I don't know, and I don't know what to make of it, so I have nothing else to say about it.
Yeah,
what do you want me to say?
Yeah, but you say there's no evidence. But then there's a text message where he says, "I give Pop 50% of my money." That's evidence.
Okay. Well, okay, fine.
So
it's evidence. I appreciate you having me on.
It doesn't. Something like that. Who do you think is being more? I listen to that and I'm saying,
Am I?
You can free to go.
I feel you want me to leave, like just walk out in the middle of this because that way you can
you can go.
Right.
Is this a standard? Really, this is the way the Washington Post handles people who disagree with them.
When I agree to be on for 45 minutes,
go,
and then I get on for an hour and 15. Yeah, that after a while I go. Thanks for having me.
He just can't do it. He does the whole thing as smug and arrogant and self-righteous as you'd expect from these mainstream media hacks. I'm being fair and balanced and neutral. And by being fair and balanced and neutral, he means experiencing extreme cognitive dissonance when it comes to scandals relating to Democrats. I'm sure if we were to delve into Philip Bump's worldview, he's probably made the argument multiple times that Hillary Clinton did nothing wrong and never smashed her hard drives, just like Joe Biden was never involved here. Anytime it's related to a Democrat, close your eyes, yell at the top of your lungs, and call any evidence either inconclusive or a conspiracy theory. Notice how he completely avoided the actual content or the evidence that was being presented to him. He makes the claim that Joe Biden never received any of the money. Then when confronted of a legitimate Hunter Biden text message where Hunter says he has to give 50% of his cash to his old man, he gets flustered, turns red like a damn tomato, and pretty much calls the whole thing off, and then runs out of the podcast studio as fast as you could possibly imagine. I wonder why that is. Well, probably because it pretty much debunks all of his reporting on this particular issue. This guy, Philip Bump, is the guy in the media whose sole purpose, whose sole job, is to tell people that water isn't wet and to never believe their lying eyes. Never believe what you hear and never believe what you see. Only believe what I tell you, because I'm the neutral, fact-based journalist. You know, the fact-based journalist who completely falls apart the moment his bogus narrative is proven wrong. Joe Biden never got any kickbacks. There's no evidence to suggest that. No, of course not. He was only living in a beautiful beach home that his son Hunter Biden was paying $50,000 a month to rent. A property that was worth what? Maybe $6,000-7,000 a month? If we were to price it as a long-term rental? I mean, even if you were renting that short-term as a little vacation spot, there's no way that beach property in, I think, Delaware would fetch $50,000 a month. It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. But of course, that's not evidence. There's no conclusive evidence. The whole thing is evidence. Joe Biden's lavish lifestyle. I mean, what was Hunter making money for? Clearly, based on all the reporting, based on all the testimony and the actual documents that we've covered, some from the FBI, what Burisma was paying Hunter Biden for was for access to his father. Well, clearly, if they ended up paying him millions upon millions upon millions of dollars, they were getting access to his father. Obviously, otherwise they wouldn't have paid him. Maybe one deal where he promises he's going to get to his father and then doesn't, and it falls through and he takes the money anyways because, you know, he's a scammer and a scumbag. But to be doing multiple deals with foreign oligarchs from different countries one after another, obviously he was delivering the goods, so to speak. But no, that's not conclusive evidence. Yeah, Joe Biden's entire existence, his lavish lifestyle is evidence. You don't pay for that unless you have big frickin' bucks. You don't get big frickin' bucks on a government salary. You can do well, of course. I mean, especially if you have a long career, if you're saving up and putting your money away and investing properly, you could gather a nice little investment nest egg, sure. But to be living the life of somebody with a net worth of $100+ million, yeah, you don't get there on a government salary, especially not with as many kids as Joe Biden has. All those kids had to go to college. All those kids needed healthcare. All those kids need supplies, eat food. It's freaking expensive to raise one kid, let alone all of the kids that Joe Biden's fathered in his life. That costs a lot of money. All of that on a government salary to then end up living the life of the rich and famous, it simply makes no sense. And even though there's not an email where Joe Biden is requesting a wire transfer for some dirty work that he's done, you still have the picture. You know, a RICO case would make sense here. It's the Biden family engaging in illegal bribery schemes, peddling their access to the White House. You know, Joe Biden obviously benefited from that money. In fact, Joe Biden's the reason that money was being made in the first place. Hunter's the fall guy, if anything. Joe Biden, it's hard to say this, but I guess in a certain way is the brains behind the operation, even though there's obviously no more brain left. But, you know, speaking of no more brain left, you gotta have no more brain left to not see what is clearly going on here, and to be so obviously biased and dishonest and dismissive of evidence in a scandal related to Democrats while pretending to be a neutral, honest journalist. Give me a friggin' break. These guys are the biggest liars, the biggest hacks you'll find. And of course, after the event, the copium followed. Philip Bump took to Twitter. The non-high point of my day yesterday was showing up for a podcast interview to have the host spend an hour plus trying to gotcha me over Hunter Biden stuff. Really good use of my time. Probably a red flag when upon my arrival, he was disparaging his prior guest to the people in the room. Not sure the intent of this was explicitly to ask dim-witted questions repeatedly until I lost my patience, but it does seem to have paid off for the host. What a piece of work, man. Dim-witted questions? Really? You know what I mean, like trying to clarify the record and challenge you on your previous fluff piece dishonest journalism? Gotcha questions? You mean like asking about relevant questions related to the biggest scandal in, I don't know, possibly modern American history next to Russiagate and Hillary Clinton's obvious involvement in that shadow coup to unseat President Trump? I don't know. I don't really need to make the case as to why this is absolute copium. It's, you know, trying to paint a pathetic victim narrative. Give me a break. Everyone, I'm sure, sees right through this guy. What an absolute mainstream media clown. This is journalism in the year 2023. Anyways, that's what I got for you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to leave a like and possibly subscribe to the channel. You know, we'd love to have you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.